In this video, we'll focus on publishing, testing, and customizing SOAP services with Genexus, including assigning a namespace or including more than one method in a single web service. We're going to publish a procedure object as a service. This service will access the database of an application for a travel agency and will return the collection of tourist attractions registered by the agency that belong to a given country. To do so, we create a procedure object and name it GetAttractionsByCountry WS. When we publish a web service, it's important to choose a name that helps identify the function of the service so that it's clear to the consumer. The procedure receives the country identifier by parameter and returns in a string a JSON structure with the list of attractions that belong to the received country. To define the structure, we create an SDT collection with the data of the attractions we want to return, and in the procedure, we create an SDT attractions variable of the SDT collection data type, a OneAttraction variable of the collection item type, and an attractions variable of the long varchar type that will contain the JSON that the procedure will return. In the source, the forEach navigates the attraction table associated with the attraction base transaction, filtered by the country received by parameter. For each attraction encountered, it loads the values into an item, and then the item is added to the collection. Finally, the collection SDT variable is serialized to a JSON and assigned to the output parameter variable. To expose the GetAttractionsByCountry WS procedure as a SOAP service, we set the ExposeAsWebService property to true, and set the SOAP protocol property to true, and REST protocol to false. For the service to be published on the web server, we must do a build. Now, we'll verify that the procedure is correctly exposed as a SOAP service. To test it, we can use several tools, such as SOAP UI or Postman. These tools allow consuming the web service as clients to check if the service is working correctly and to obtain detailed information about the process, both for SOAP and REST web services. It's also useful to use tools that allow you to view the service flow, that is, to see the execution request to the server, request, and the response of the service, response. Two of the best known tools are Fiddler and TCP Trace. TCP Trace is free, open source, but only allows HTTP flow. For HTTPS, Fiddler must be used. These tools are between the consumer application and the web server, as if it were a proxy, and show the request and response between the client and the service. We're going to use the SOAP UI tool to test our service. To do so, we open the soapui.org webpage and download SOAP UI open source. Next, we install it, and when we run it, the start page appears. If in Resources we click on Test a SOAP API, it opens a page with instructions, so we'll follow them. We create a new SOAP project. In the project name, we type GetAttractionsByCountry and press OK. Now we right-click on the project and choose Add WSDL. This WSDL file was generated by Genexus following the web service's description language specification. It contains the information of how our web service is structured, including its methods, the parameters of each method, and so on. To view the contents of this file, we open a browser window and type the URL of our service. Since we're generating in .NET, we write the URL formed by concatenating the URL of the web root property of the generator and the name of our exposed procedure. Then we add .aspx, a question mark, and the letters WSDL. If the generator were Java, we would add \servlet before the object name and not the ASPX extension. If the exposed object were a business component, the business component name would be followed by _BC if the generator were .NET, and by _BC_WS if the generator were Java. We press Enter and see that the browser shows the web service structure where we identify some things such as the name, the execute method required by the country ID parameter, and so on. Now that we know that the WSDL was opened correctly, we're going to enter the same URL in the SOAP UI project window and press OK. Under the project we created, an entry is displayed with the name of our service and the execute method. If we press the plus button, a request is automatically generated to invoke the service. We double-click, and the request editor opens. On the left side, there's a template of the XML for the invocation. And on the right side, there's the response given by the service when it's invoked. In the request window, in the execute method, we identify the country ID parameter. So we replace the question mark with the identifier of the country for which we want to obtain information about its attractions. We write to, which is the ID of France. Now we press the play button and see that the structure of the response appears on the right. In the attractions node, moving to the right, the collection of tourist attractions in France appears in straight brackets. We can also see this information as XML, and we verify that our Get Attractions by Country service is working perfectly. Now let's look at the concept of namespace and how this can be useful when publishing a service. A namespace is a container of names where the same name cannot be repeated. However, the same name can be present in more than one namespace. The exposed namespace property allows us to assign a namespace to a service. This property contains a string that helps to identify the web service. The combination of the namespace with the name of the web service must be unique. In this way, if we have two services with the same name, but which belong to different applications, they'll be correctly identified by changing the namespace. By default, the exposed namespace property has the name of the KB, and that does not cause any problems if we're in the prototyping stage. However, when we move the service to the production environment, we must write in this property a URL that identifies the company or the project to which the service belongs. Otherwise, some consumers will not be able to process it. When adding security to web services, it's crucial that this URI, Uniform Resource Identifier, which consists of the URL and the name of the service, be well-formed and unique. Something that may arise when exposing a service is how we can include several methods within the same service. As we already confirmed, if we expose a procedure object as a web service, the service includes only one method, execute. If you need to define more than one method in the same web service, you must use stubs in the procedure source. Stubs are clauses which, within the source of a procedure object, allow us to define a block of code associated with a name, and then execute the code by invoking that name. The concept is similar to that of a subprogram or subroutine, and each stub can have its own parameters. It's important to point out that the use of stubs is only valid when we expose the procedure with the SOAP protocol. The procedures exposed as REST do not support this functionality. Let's see an example of exposing a SOAP procedure with more than one method. Let's suppose that we want the procedure Get Attractions by Country WS that we expose as a web service to have two methods. One, to bring all the tourist attractions of a country, and another one, to return only the attractions of a country with a number of trips greater than or equal to a given number. we save the procedure getAttractionsByCountry WS as getAttractionsByCountry WS2 and modify its parm rule by adding the variable tripQuantity as input parameter. In the source, we create two stubs. One named AllAttractionsByCountry, which receives as parameter the country ID, and returns a JSON with all the attractions of that country, with or without trips. And another stub named AttractionsByCountry with trips, which receives as parameters the country ID and the number of trips by which we want to filter, and returns a JSON with the attractions found that have the same number or more trips than the value of the variable tripsQuantity. Let's do a build all so that the service is published on the server. We're going to import the new web service we created. To do so, we run the wizard, type the new URL with the name of the new object, and press Next. Now we modify the name of the suggested external object by adding _EO, type the name of a destination folder, and click on Next. Now if we open the service description node, we see that the execute method is no longer there, and there are the two methods corresponding to the stubs we created. If we select each method, in the window on the right we can see the parameters, which match those previously defined in the stubs. If, for compatibility reasons, it's required that the execute method continues to be exposed, a stub with the name execute must be expressly created. Moving on with the wizard, we click on Import and verify that the external object was created inside the folder we already had. If we open it, we confirm that it has the two methods that we defined. In this way, we've experienced the flexibility of including several methods in the same service, something very useful for the consumer of our SOAP web service.